Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent uh-oh experiences in business.
Learn what their uh-oh cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Welcome, Cohesive Leaders. I'm Trevor Crunelle with the Growth Coach of the Low Country. I'm filling in today for Ben-Jamin Toy. Dr. Troy is also on the line with us. And today we have with us Chris Lorence. So welcome, Chris. We're privileged to have you with us today.
Hello, thank you. It's great to be here.
Sure.
So Chris, we always like to start out the show by having our guests tell us something about you that is not on your resume.
Something that's not on my resume. So I've wanted to work in a bank or credit union since I was 7 years old. So I knew that was my career path. From my mom, when she would pull up to the drive-through and she'd put a piece of paper in the little thing that went into the credit union, and then it came out and it had cash and lollipops. And I was like, I want to be in there, where whatever that is the best place in the world to be. So, but I've also looked at being a chef, a real estate agent, a bartender. I've looked at a whole bunch of different careers and gotten certified to do all of those things. But I ended up always back in doing where my passion lies, which is banking.
So you always wanted to be a part of the lollipop gang, right?
That's it. Always thought the drive-through was fascinating. When I was in high school and could drive, I was able to get my first job as a teller, and just loved it. You know, the whole balancing my drawer, you know, walking into the vault. People used to say, "Isn't that amazing to walk into the vault?" And it was for the first week. And then you have to count it, and then it was just paper. You know, so, but I've always enjoyed that.
And that's so important that you say that, because, you know, for my whole career in banking, it's kind of like that. The money doesn't seem like money anymore. It just was a transaction piece, you know, it was just something that was there. And so all the mystique sometimes around what you do. I wasn't really that fond of the teller window, although I did pretty well when I worked it, but that was not my favorite part of it. So, but yeah, I think maybe giving out lollipops would have been a better thing if I had done that. So good. Well, thanks for sharing.
As to what your favorite part of the banking role has been.
I really hit my stride when I moved into lending. I had such a passion for it because, you know, I'm one of those people that went through school and hated math, but realized once I got into lending, yes, there was math, but there was also lots of great computer programs that sort of made things a lot easier. But I was always interested in solving problems. So when I would look at, someone's credit bureau and they came in looking for, a car loan, I was always the one that was going, but what if, we got rid of this credit card or we did this? And I love to be able to, create situations where people walked out better. One of my favorite stories was working at the FDIC Employees Federal Credit Union as chief operating officer. And one of the examiners came in to adopt, they were going for an adoption in Russia and they had to have cash. So we ordered cash and they took it with them to Russia to basically adopt their baby. And in about 6 weeks, they came back into the branch with their baby. So I got to kind of see, it wasn't a lending thing, but it was being part of that situation was a really unique and interesting way of being able to show how, banking plays a different and a bigger part in everyday lives.
It's really so true, Chris, when you say that, because I think people do not always see the bigger picture of the fact that, in our role in credit unions, it is all about improving the financial conditions of people's lives and helping them meet their goals, dreams, and aspirations in a way that is financially sound for them and what really makes sense for them. And to take that approach of making sure that we know what we do for others before self is such an important principle in all of that. So, before we get too much further into your roles and things that you play, another thing we like to do is to really separate who you are, as in your identity, from who you are, as in your role. So, the first part of this question is to have you identify for us some words that would describe you. Now, these could be attributes, characteristics, they could be things that people will say when you leave the room, or maybe things that you hope people will say when you leave the room. So, what would be some words that describe your identity or who you are as an identity?
I am a very typical firstborn. I am a rule follower. I get angsty if I'm not on time. Like I get up every morning with a list in my head, and I come in and sit down. And sometimes I'll do things, and then I'll go put them on the list so I can cross them off. So I am very much into creating the environment in which I do well, and that is order, keeping track of things. I'm very much someone who keeps track of their calendar and remembers birthdays and things that I like to send cards. I love to send a card to people and do it very impromptu. And I was reminded actually a couple of weeks ago, someone was talking to me about who they see me as, and that is I am one of those people. One of my core values is accountability. If I had anything to do with anything, I will stand up and tell you that what my part or what I thought my part was, and typically will own it and try to do better the next time. And I think that's I will spend some time typically if somebody brings anything to my attention, if I've done or perceived to have created something that may not have gone well or did go well, I want to know like what was my part so that I can improve.
That's really great. Trevor, did you hear him say that he actually wrote something on a list so we can mark it off?
I did. It sounds like a high C to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Um,
thinking, a
Yeah.
little bit there. But okay, now and it's really crazy. And I love the fact that you identified yourself as a rule follower because in our family, I have three uh, grandchildren who are sisters. And so the oldest one is definitely the rule follower. The second one says, I don't understand these rules. And the third one says, what rules?
mhm,
So we
mhm.
kind of get the progression of how that is. So okay, great to know that about you because it sounds like you're definitely someone that people could count on, whether it was in a pinch or whether it was just in regular needs. So now, what are some of the roles? And you mentioned them before when you talked about real estate agent and bartender and things of that. But what are the roles that you play as a leader?
I am a hands-on type of leader. I am probably one of the things that has been brought to my attention from a leadership, as people have told me, bosses have told me about myself. I am very hands-on, and delegating is something that I will do, but only after I fully understand what I'm asking someone else to do. And that means that I love to, when social media was first coming out, I was learning social media on my own before we developed and before we had hired anybody that was going to be able to do it for us. Um, I am, from a leadership perspective, someone who loves to ask a question. I like to try to figure out what people are thinking and will often reserve my contribution until I think I can fully understand what's going on in people's minds, because I don't want to create more chaos or create more issue if there's something happening around the leadership table, as we're coming to terms with launching a new product, or trying to figure out what to do with personnel decisions. I really want to know the driver behind things, and before I will offer my insights.
That's great. And Trevor, I think do you have a series of questions there that you want to jump in and ask Chris? I don't want to hog the microphone the whole time.
No, you're fine. You're keeping us on track. I appreciate that.
Okay, great. All right. Well, then, Trevor, we'll just have you. We know that you're on the controls, and you could just chime in there anytime you want and interrupt me if you need to, because this is the conversations, podcast. So we'll be good.
Right.
Okay, good. All right. So, Chris, now it's time to get into the meat of the episode. This is what we've all been waiting for. And that is, what is the experience that you are prepared to share with us? And again, we specifically want to make sure that it's identified as to how personal it is to you. And then we'll just sort of, have some general conversation after that. So, what's the experience that you prepared to share with us today?
My is as an overachiever, someone who's really focused. I saw myself, as I said, working in a credit union. I've wanted to be a CEO of a credit union probably my entire career. That's what I strove to do. That's what I wanted to do. Um, and in my sort of plot twist of life, I ended up doing everything but that. Um, and it turns out however it turns out. But in my the last 4 years when I was working for Credit Union National Association, now America's Credit Unions, I led the Open Your Eyes to a Credit Union program nationally. And when that program was being sunset, I decided that for my next role, I wanted to learn as much as I could about myself as a leader, someone who was seasoned and someone who had experienced things. And I did a leadership 360. And so in doing that, my board, people superior to me, peers, people that reported to me, places where I volunteered, all had an opportunity to sort of weigh in to a massive questionnaire about who I was as a leader. And I did a self-evaluation, and I waited for this thing to come back. And I get it. It's in a disc, format, and I got to learn about myself, and it all looked really good. But I was really concerned about, like, what am I not good at? Because I wanted to, I want to improve. I want to do better. And everybody always has areas of where they can improve. But the two things that stood out for me, and I carried it immediately. It was like dropping this giant brick on my head. Was someone took the time to write that being around me could be sometimes heavy, because I was so focused on creating opportunities for people to improve and grow and get promoted, that not everybody was interested in being promoted. Not everybody was interested in growth professionally. Some people just wanted to come to work. And that never, ever occurred to me. And I don't know why it never occurred to me, because I always just assumed that everybody came to work with the idea that, I want to get a bigger salary and I want to get a bigger title. And that was me. That's how I think, but that's not how everybody thinks. So that was something that I was able to look at and go, wow, have I done that? Where have I pushed people? Where have I asked people, how can we get you promoted? What other skills do you want to do? And it was an opportunity for me to reflect and think, this may have been something that, unfortunately, if one person thought I was heavy, there's probably other people that thought I was heavy. The second thing that popped out of that 360 was, while people saw me as incredibly capable and reliable and trustworthy and getting things done, they didn't know who I was. I didn't share a ton about myself personally. Like, what do I stand for? I was interested in what other people stood for, and I was interested in other people personally, but I didn't share a lot about myself. And so those were two things where I really did stand back and learned from that 360. I probably would be a different leader today had I been more conscious about the heaviness of always driving, pushing, trying to achieve or trying to do, and instead of just owning that for myself and not expecting other people to have that same thought process.
So that's really interesting because I think it is you're a high performer and your mindset is basically that everyone around you is going to be a high performer as well. And
Yes.
although we gear this podcast to those emerging leaders, to individuals who, they're dissatisfied because they're not getting training and development from their current employer, or they're not they're being passed over for promotion with no plan for success. We focus on that first part, which basically says that, hey, I'm not getting the training and development I need, because even though an individual doesn't want to be promoted to another level, they still want to be developed. What we're finding through the current employment pool of individuals is that sometimes they don't want more responsibility, but they want to be really good at their job. Or they want to be prepared so that if they change their mind and decide they want to go into it, then they're ready to go. And I think that's really good that you recognize that about yourself, because you may have, you may have pushed people kind of in the wrong way. You may have pushed them completely away when in fact you had these great intentions of being helpful. It's just not having that moment where you recognize that not everyone wanted that help.
Exactly.
So, Chris, how did you then start changing how you related to the people differently, or how you figured out whether or not they were someone that wanted to be pushed or not?
Yeah, great question. Asking more questions. I mean, I said earlier that, I like to ask questions, but I wasn't asking the right questions. And it necessarily, when I was thinking about what do you want to do next, like how do you want to grow, instead, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And if somebody were to say, I see myself sitting right here answering this phone, I could be okay with that, and not challenge that, because giving someone the ability and the transparency to be able to say, I'm good, I'm actually very satisfied. So I began to change my my why. Instead of like, I want to be a leader of a CEO of a credit union. Um, Instead, I was like, well, how can I help other people become more informed? So one of the things, as I told you about wanting to work inside of a bank or a credit union, was I was always fascinated about like board meetings. When I was a person coming through the ranks in management, everybody got to go to the board meeting. They got to fly off to some far-flung place, and everybody had such a great time. And I was just like, it must be magical to go to a board meeting. And when I got to go to
Okay,
my
okay, we got to stop you there, because we know, yes, there, for those listening, there is no magic in the board meeting. Okay, great. Go ahead. Keep going,
No,
Chris.
but it's true. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like when you don't get to go, I would sit down, and I had a mentor who was in leadership, and he'd be like, he'd come back, and I'm like, well, what happened? Like, what's going on? So he eventually said to me, well, you're going to give a presentation. Oh my God, I was so nervous. It was a new program we were launching, and I was able to go. Of course, now, interacting as executive director, when I was at CUNA for the Open Your Eyes program, I had my own board and have dealt with numerous boards throughout my whole career. I decided at that point that my job was to come back to my team and others and basically dispel. This is what happens at the board meeting. These are the documents. I mean, the things that you could share, of course, the things that were internal that you couldn't share, but more of I wrote a synopsis and said, here's what we talked about. Here's what was going on, because Dr. Troy, to your point, the idea of communication is one of the things I used to love to hear was, I mentioned. And if one of my team members was mentioned in a board meeting, I made sure, and even today, as I consult with organizations and I sit in leadership teams, if I'm consulting with someone within that organization, I will text them and say, hey, you just got mentioned, because it feels good to me. That never goes away. That good feeling of I got mentioned, of the good work that I'm doing. And I make sure that I pass that on. So I took that sort of leadership 360 information of maybe not necessarily being pushed to another level within the organization, and instead said, but you still want to know that you matter. You still want to know that you're being mentioned. You still want to know that people care about you. And so they do that by talking about you in a good way.
Yeah, and what's really great about that too is when you give a person a shout out, like you said, hey, you were mentioned in the board meeting today. It is such a great thing, because it really falls back into our cohesive elements of, the first one is belonging or being included. And the individual knows, hey, I didn't have to be present to be included in the board meeting. And obviously we're giving a shout out because it was a positive mention in the board meeting. And And typically for me in my career, I would have done that if we had an executive meeting or if we had a leadership meeting and someone was mentioned. I always made the connection back, letting them know that so and so may have made some favorable feedback to them, because if we don't tell them, they don't know. There's no minutes that comes from this that everybody is looking at or reading. So I think is so important. But now I want to go back though to what when you talked about this uh-oh experience and what happened with you. I want to know, how did it impact your self-confidence when you found out that information?
Um, it is a moment for me where I do an assessment, and we've all had learning experiences throughout our lives where, sometimes people appear to let things roll off their back, but I'm one of those. I process, and I sit, life goes on. I'm the perfect person to have in an emergency, because I'm going to be calm, cool, collected. Afterwards, I'm going to think it to death. And I did. I really sat down and I read that over and over again, and I shared it with a few people that had been part of that experience with me, including the consultant that I hired to do it. And I was trying to make sense of it from has this harmed people, and do I need to go back and apologize to anybody for pushing so hard? And the answer is no. I wasn't rogue about it. I wasn't hideous and chasing people around and saying you will be promoted. But I had a moment where it did reflect back on me, where during and I only had this happen one time. I actually promoted someone, and they turned me down. And their explanation back to me, which was wise because I never realized it until after I experienced it myself, was this promotion, this title will make it impossible for me to find another job. Because once you've attained this next level, and it was a senior vice president role, I will never be able to, look for something lower than that. And I was like, oh, come on. It is 100% true. Once you've
Yeah.
attained some level, people can never see you, no matter how you try to spin it, explain it. It was a company of 8 people and I was senior vice president. You had that title. And I looked back and reflected and thought, interesting, was this one of those times where I wanted to elevate someone to show them that they had done good work, and they were going like, no, I really don't need this. Like, I'm good right where I am.
So that's interesting. But going back to the self-confidence, because I really
Mhm.
want to delve in a little bit on it before we go into some other pieces. Oftentimes when people hear something that is shocking to them or something they didn't completely expect, they get paralyzed.
Mm.
So, did you suffer any kind of, sort of like, I need to retreat, I pull back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm never, this is horrible, I'm not going to survive. Every time I see people, they're looking at me out the corner of their eye, they know something's wrong. I mean, any of that happen?
Had I not lived an entire leadership career where I always thought people were looking at the corner of their eye, this was really no different for me. But it did cause me to spend some time. I did some intense journaling. I did some how would things be different, thinking through the process. And then I thought, well, what do you do about it? Like, how do you change it? And I really, again, pulled in my resources and started asking questions. I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose the ability to see opportunity and try to lift people, because there are tons of people that should be lifted, and there isn't anybody there to do that. But what I did learn was to craft different types of questions, to make sure that as I was looking to try to help, if that was what I was attempting to do, that the person was actually looking for help.
And do you have an example of a question that you would have used or something that comes to mind?
Again, I think looking at like, where do you see yourself, but asking the questions that are they're sort of anti-questions. If you could go back and look at yourself, go back 5 years, is there a different career path you would have taken? Is there a place in your career where you should have turned left, but you turned right or kept going straight? And it is a thought-provoking question because people will stand back and go, nope, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And other people are like, I should have left when I said I was going to leave. And I didn't. I stuck around. And unfortunately, I'm here now. I'm at this place now. And I'm always left wondering what would have happened had I done that, which then allows me to say, well, what was it about that left turn that was exciting to you? And try to see, is there a way to take the elements out of that left turn and bring it to current day so that maybe they could have something goes like, you didn't miss it entirely. It just brought you to a different destination, but the opportunity is still here.
Right. So far, what we've talked a little bit about is your experience deals with, you are thinking that everyone wants to be promoted and kind of, really working it from that angle. What you have identified over some of the process that you maybe have gone through now to say, this is how you're going to overcome it. You're going to ask questions. Ben and I and Trevor, we would consider those to be what we refer to as open-ended, non-leading questions that allow for information that encourage people to tell you things so that they can self-discover information along the way without it having to be told to them. That's usually a good way to get out information. Now we'd like to know, what did this cost you? And it can be in the terms of money, time, whatever you think. What would be, or what was your personal cost to you as a result of this experience?
I can only pontificate because I don't have proof, but
Oh, he can pontificate. Oh my goodness, this is so exciting when you're using big words on the podcast. Okay, good.
like I said, I always wanted to be the CEO, and it never happened. And as I got closer, I had a 20-year career in community banking, and when I left to go to credit unions, that was an abrupt end of that career path. But when I got back into credit unions, I really thought, okay, this is great. I've got all this knowledge, and I'm going to be able to apply it here. And as we were beginning to look at how Open Your Eyes was transitioning, what was going to happen next, I sat with two of my board members at lunch one day. And I said, one was the league president and one was the president of a credit union. And I said, what would it take? What are next steps? What would it take for me to get into the chair and into the seat of to be a CEO? And I'm not kidding you. In a nanosecond, they both said, not going to happen. And I was like, okay, you first. Why isn't it going to happen? And the league president was the first one to answer, and just not for you. It's not going to happen for you. You didn't spend your entire credit union or financial experience in credit unions. And the branch or the credit union CEO said, my words, not his, but you basically need to be conceived in the lobby in order to be able to be blessed enough to become the CEO of a credit union. No matter what your talent is, no matter how many training you have, no matter how much experience you have, there is this expectation that you have been brought up within the community. And one of those, questions was, is it because I have been so intense about my being particular about making lists and seeing my career path in such a way, did I miss the signs for myself that I should have been more aware of? I'm trying desperately to to get to this CEO title, and I could have maybe relaxed a little bit and said, you know what, that's not going to happen this time for you. You need to go over here and use your talents in other ways and fulfill yourself. And that's ultimately what ended up happening, because once Open Your Eyes ended, I ended up going into consulting, and it ended up being really fruitful because I'm able to work with CEOs and I'm able to work with people who want to move up in their careers. And I sort of stand back and go like, okay, well, let me just tell you what you don't do. Don't eagerly raise your hand and go, pick me, because that scares people to death when it comes to volunteering and wanting to be the CEO, because they're like, no,
Yeah,
we'll go find somebody else.
that's really good. Now you just said some. I mean, I am so hopeful that our listeners will pay attention clear to the last minute, because you just gave another gem to individuals who are looking to advance. And that is, there is an art and a science to the eagerness that you display. We know the science is raise my hand, I want to get involved. The art is how you make that happen without you positioning yourself to look as though you are too anxious to get involved. Because you're exactly right. It throws people off, it makes them question, they get a little concerned. And it was a lesson I had to learn very early in my career, because hey, I'm like, oh, okay, I raise my hand. Yeah, sure, pick me. I'll go. If you remember, and we're dating ourselves, so there are going to be individuals who have to look this up. But there was a character called Horshack in one of those old shows, and he was in. Oh gosh, I was
Welcome
trying to
back,
think of the
Cotter.
Welcome back,
Welcome
Cotter.
back. Welcome back, Cotter. And he would actually be the one that would raise his hand and go, ooh, 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 pick me, pick me, pick me. And of course, never got picked. So, yes. So good insight to that. Oh my gosh, Chris, just I can't believe like all this great information that you have given us today. So, Trevor and I would like to know, what is a question that you thought one of us would ask that we didn't?
Question that you didn't ask. What are you going to do next?
Okay, what are you going to do next?
I haven't the faintest idea. No, I really enjoy the consulting is extremely rewarding in that I can be helpful across a broader spectrum. I've really enjoyed Nick Wadagaza and I do Wednesdays with Nick and Chris, which started off as a conversation with just he and I chatting with each other. And I said, we should record this. I know he's been on your podcast, but the idea of working with smaller credit unions and helping them realize their value beyond just the perfunctory nature of being a credit union. You know, one of the things that I learned through Open Your Eyes and the Your Money Further program was so many consumers don't know what the credit union difference is. And if I might just sort of say this, just because it's interesting, we had 16 million people come to the Your Money Further website, and when they searched to find a credit union, the number one thing that they searched on was financial education. They didn't get to search on car loan until like topic number 5. And I say this to credit unions all the time. When you go to your website, all you see is interest rate, interest rate, interest rate. That is a component of what people are looking for, but they want to know who you are and they want to know your why before they're going to entertain, because they know you have low interest rates, because that's what you've talked about for the last 85 years. But what else do you do? And I think if you go back to credit union, the very beginning of the cooperative and the 8 cooperative principles that credit unions are founded on, that's why people joined credit unions. If you look at the last 30 years, credit unions have talked about interest rate. And it's like we need to go back to the beginning and say, let us tell you our why and why that affects you as a member.
Chris, thank you so much for that. So now I know folks are interested in connecting with you. How do they find you? How would you like them to connect with you?
I have a website, Fractional Edge Marketing, and Chris at fractionaledgemarketing.com. It's very
And
easy.
that would be itch, just like it sounds, ITCH.
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, super duper. All right, Trevor, now we're going to close out the podcast. And now Ben and I close it out a certain way. Did he prompt you for how you're going to, for your portion of that closeout?
He did, yes.
Okay, excellent. So, Chris and all of our listeners, as we close out our Cohesion Culture programs, it's with this mantra: you don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.
That's excellent.